Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast. I should change my background here so it matches what's going on. There we go. Let's try that. There we go. Good morning. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast. This is what I read when I make my intros every morning. Welcome, Tommy, Seth, and Mike. It's we're all here. The gang's here. I'm ready to get going.
Happy Tuesday, gentlemen. Happy
It's
Tuesday.
my favorite part
Kevin
of the
Arnold
day.
In the chat, I see you.
Seeing you gentlemen on my Tuesday mornings.
Everyone in the chat, welcome. Appreciate you guys being here. All right, let's get into some intro things. We have a correction potentially, or I guess it's someone who's listening and understands Excel to the nth degree. We had was this in a mailbag, Tommy, or someone commented down there? Tommy, you want to give us the kind of actually? I guess Seth, maybe we should have you read
We
this
have
one.
our narrator.
We have a narrator.
Oh man,
do you have the OneNote up?
It's on OneNote.
Out of it. So
well,
out of it.
While Seth goes there, I guess he gets synced up on that one. This one was quite interesting. I think I got corrected, which is okay. I mean, I haven't been here forever on all things Excel, but I guess some fact checking inside Wikipedia / the internet. I'll let you know how old Excel was. I think back here in the concept is episode 13. We talked a little bit about Excel and how you use Excel inside Power BI, and my history of Excel was a little bit vague, I guess. We'll put it that way.
How's our narrator? All right.
Yeah, I'm good. I think I've got it.
All right, go ahead, narrator.
Link. Keeping up with Power BI, episode 13. Power BI tips from the real world. About 17 minutes in. Mike, you referenced Excel, and it sounds like you're saying it's been around 25 years. ... 1987, 35 years. Link to Wikipedia page, but also found another link. You guys should drop that in the window. Excel trick, others, history of Excel, which shows the predecessors' foundations of spreadsheeting. I remember using Lotus 123, so taking the time to research and remember the past. I absolutely love the podcast. Since I found it, I've started at the beginning. Well, thank you, new listener, for joining us and fact-checking Mike with a 35. Did you guys check out that Excel trick page? It's absolutely hilarious.
Really?
Like, yeah. Well, they have this. I love diagram. Obviously, I love visuals.
Yeah.
So, like, you look into this, and I'm like, I got the flashback moment when I hit like the 1995 version, right? As a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, like that one stuck out to me as far as like the logo. I think that was Excel 7.0, also known as Excel 95, the first major 32-bit version of Excel. Almost no external changes, but it was faster and more stable.
It's got a good little timeline in there.
Like, yeah, like asking chat. This would have been a good like swag giveaway for a chat, right? Where did it all start? VisiCalc. Green screen, 5 columns, 20 rows.
Originally released on the Apple II computer.
Yeah.
So Excel spreadsheets have been around since the dawn of computers, basically.
Which
That's
makes
what that
sense.
tells me.
And a little advice for the person who put that mailbag in: if you're looking for mistakes, you're gonna exhaust yourself.
Yeah, you're gonna get really tired in this podcast.
I mean, or
don't be a
really,
hero.
Actually, if you have that like QA personality, you'll love our show. Just go through it. It's rife with errors, I'm sure, bugs, problems that you can bring towards us. We can do episodes on how wrong we were.
That's probably part of the point of what we're doing here, right? Is say something and then correct yourself a couple months later.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's about churning the ideas over and over and figuring out where they all lay out.
And I'm all for anyone calling out Mike on a mistake. I mean, it's only because Mike always goes, "Well, are you arguing with me? I'm always right." So anytime,
no, I'm never like that.
Just beautiful kind of thing.
Tommy, I want to take a moment for like a little reflection here. I feel like you're bringing some angst to the show. Like, are you? Do we need to have a sesh where we flesh it all out, man? Like, do you feel like we're
on the chair?
Like, first a couple episodes is like picking teams, who's mean to Tommy, and now we're digging into Mike. Like Mike's
There we go.
I don't know.
Listen,
I need
Mike
to take
is
a nap.
so smart to me that anytime he may make a mistake, that's all it is.
Yeah,
is Mike's always coming with truth bombs and amazing content. So anytime, especially on this podcast, as much as we argue, just a little someone else on the outside. Like I said, it's just
it's a little seasoning on your day.
It's a little turmeric, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one.
You're doing the salt guy. Who's the guy that does the salt with his arm?
Salt Bay up the arm.
Yeah, he just salted me.
Listen, my mistakes are so bad that you guys can call them out immediately in real time. So at least someone has to research it. So.
At least someone has to research it.
Well, I do have to ask. This begs the question. Talking about Excel, if you were to have a visualization of hours used in Excel on a weekly basis since VisuCalc, or whenever you started using it, do you see a stark decline since Power BI? Like, what does that visual look like for you guys in terms of use of Excel?
Hold on one quick. That's a great question, Tommy. It's a great question, but I want to, Kevin. You are hilarious in the comments. Kevin goes, I've been listening for a year. I've been listening not to learn anything for over a year.
Hey, Kevin, that's your fault.
No, it's just that there's nothing to learn here.
No, yeah. If you were trying to figure out oh, it's too good.
No amazing secrets kept here, that's for sure. All right, sorry, Tommy. Back to unpinning your question. Your question was, over time, have you seen a decline in Excel as you personally use it over time? I would say yes. When I got really into macros and writing Excel stuff, when I was in the engineering department, I was using Excel a lot more. And then once I moved into like more of the marketing department or out of engineering, I did more things with data and larger data, but it was a lot less in Excel. It was more in Power BI.
No, I am
I still use it
with you, yeah.
But I use a lot more Power BI and data modeling now than I do Excel at this point.
Seth, what does your line chart look like?
From when I started using
Back
Power
to the
BI?
beginning.
Back to the beginning.
1978 when it was
sharp curve.
When you were in high,
yeah. I probably use Excel more than I do.
Really
more now. Yeah, because if you think about when I jumped into Power BI, it was hardcore development all the time, and now I have to do more planning and be like in charge of people and like get my ideas around things before I go and build reports. So I probably use it more than I did before.
That's encouraging to hear, and I think that speaks a lot to our conversations on is Excel dying or what's going to happen to Excel, and never will. For situations like that, like if you have manager or director in your title, you're going to be using Excel extensively. Like for me, Excel, as soon as Power BI came out, it was a stark decline to now maybe I'm opening it once a week, but I don't have that need anymore. Like much as I love Excel.
I think where I've also seen a lot of usage is where in organizations where like it could be twofold. One is you don't really have like main data repositories that you have access to, or you have really hardcore cloud solutions where accessing unstructured data is challenging to do. Throw into that multiple different sources or places where you can get data. Excel's almost an everyday part of the Power BI flow of building reporting, right? It's always the first rev. It's the first phase of like, let's get something back to the business. And then we can go figure out the ETL patterns, where we need to restructure data, where we need to push things depending on, I think, kind of audience, how big the report is going to get, how impactful it's going to be, where we have to start thinking about refresh of data data consistency, data quality, all those kinds of things. And that's not every single report. So I'm actually like interacting with a lot of Excel for like things right now because we have a lot of things in throughout different systems. And it's the first version of plugging in and giving data insights before we or while we kind of determine what the paths are to bring data into a more structured cloud-based big data solutions.
I would say, I mean, also from Excel, I think Excel's, I mean, Greg Baldini points it out very clearly. Excel is the world's largest programming language. It's a functional language, but you're writing formulas in Excel. It is used everywhere. There's a lot of people who understand it and know it. So I think, I mean, for that very reason, anyone who's coming into the workforce or who's starting out in the workforce would 100% need to know a lot of things about Excel. And I think just if you wanted to even have just a good career overall, I think just taking some solid classes around being an expert in Excel and doing as much as you can, learning as much as you can in that program would really help you out long term, because you become that person who's that go-to person. Some departments are strong in Excel, other departments are not as strong. But if you become that person that people know they can get to you for help and answers inside Excel, it creates a lot of opportunities, I think, as well.
That actually would be a great future topic on the Excel skills. Does that translate into being a good Power BI developer? Not necessarily Power Query or Power Pivot, but everything else.
I mean, at some level, you're doing data engineering work inside Excel already. It just, you're doing a lot more manual, effort to make the data move around.
Well, it's the flexibility, right? I mean, like, honestly, just from a personal point, like my wife and I, we put together like a home project budget on what we wanted to do. We sat down in Excel. We basically, and of course, because all of us are data analysts, I had to put like a formula together of like our priority, the average cost we're expecting in hours, and it would basically spit out a number on what we're going to do first. But that idea is like, that's not impossible in Power BI, but that ability to quickly do that.
But it's the quick part, right? Like, and I would actually, as I'm thinking about this, I would say Power BI has driven a lot more usage of Excel in my life, because I came from databases background. Like, I went from not like just using custom applications, as a business analyst or data entry, etc., into back-end systems, and really didn't use Excel to the full capabilities like that it had. So I learned a lot about Excel after jumping into Power BI heavily, and then meeting Mike and like how, like, seeing the business side and how business uses it. And there's a lot more value I get out of Excel right now. But I think where it shines is I don't want, until I know that I have big data sets that are like where I want them to be, and now I need to understand more about them, I'm not pulling it into Power BI. I'm doing that ad hoc analysis where Excel always shines, right? Where you're doing that, like, oh man, okay, here's this idea, here's the formula I'm pulling off of this. Okay, I can reference this, and okay, what does that look like? And all of that is so much easier in Excel.
You're dead. Yeah, there's a lot of good points there.
Another point I'll make out here too is there's not a lot of tools out right now today that let you edit lots of data quickly. And I think you can do this in Power Apps to some degree with like a table, and you can go in and make a list of things. One of the things I find that is the most useful, that where I'm integrating with most people right now, is it's a lot about like budgeting or putting a plan together. When there needs to be something that's physically engaging with a user, making or numbers or entering in lots of information into a table, whatever that is, right? I need to hit everything in this row, or I'm talking about hundreds of rows of data. There's just not a lot of other tools, I think, that are out there that make it super easy for you to quickly go through and add a lot of rows or records into things. I'd like to see Power Apps be a little bit better in this space, because this is an area where I would like to leverage more of what Power Apps can do to remove some of these Excel-based processes. Right now, I'm looking at a lot of processes from companies that have a handful, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 Excel files that are driving a lot of decision-making downstream. But when you do that, you have, Excel is so flexible, without any proper controls around the Excel side, you get weird data coming in. You just do.
Yeah.
You get text and number columns, and you get, people are going to write in there what they want to write in because it makes sense to them. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of how it works.
Sounds like you need a Power Apps consultant, friend.
But
Yeah,
something
maybe.
like the other part of the Excel that I love though is like think about how we want to visualize data, right?
Yep.
I cannot tell you how many times I pull in raw data.
Yep.
And there's a way in which I want to bucket the data, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 different ways, right?
Mhm.
So you fly in a couple columns, and then the speed at which I can filter, sort, understand, like, did I
Correct.
cover every row? Do I have some gaps? Do I have to create a different bucket? Like, that's where there's a ton of value in me understanding or just like getting things into a way that I can roll them up and then like right click, create a pivot table, bam. Okay, visualize it all, right? Like that speed and quick analysis is fantastic.
Two last points, at least for me, that are absolutely insane of what we think about Excel. One, every Power App I've ever created for any project that we built that was transformed to automate in the Power Platform started from discovery was in Excel. All of the processes were done in Excel, to Mike's point, but you had to utilize that, which because it's still so reliant. The other point is Excel hasn't really changed that much since it came out. Like when you think of the evolution of PowerPoint and Word, like Excel still is the same idea with the cells A1 to C15, and they really hit it on the head. And Mike, I agree with you. We're into terms of the point of it's yes, the processes that's what we put in place when it comes to like those fields, but my goodness, it's the same process that's still so reliant. Maybe it's the way people think. I don't know.
Maybe let's move on.
All right, we'll move on from Excel.
Right, what are we talking?
Let's talk about this podcast about Power BI with Excel. I love it. So today, let's move on to our main topic today. Our main topic today. I don't know what's going on with this guy. Kurt, you are incredible. You are writing amazing posts. So we're looking at an article today from Data Goblins yet again. This is like, I don't know, the 4th or 5th one here that we're checking out for Data Goblins. Absolutely love the stuff that you're pushing out here. This is talking around exploring app audiences in Power BI. So super excited about how this article, how well it's written. It really helps articulate some really needed use cases around Power BI, particularly around the apps side. So here's the article. This is the article today we're going to be talking about, Data Goblins, the Power BI app audiences. So just kind of reactions to this one. Let's kick it off here. Tommy, kick us off with some ideas around app audiences and read into the article. Anything that stuck out to you initially?
Well, I think
before we jump into the article.
Oh, sorry.
Just for our lay listener, lay out apps for us.
Okay, let's do apps. Feature. Yes. Sorry.
Like what is an app? So excited about this article.
Well, first, if you are a Power BI developer and you haven't heard of Power BI apps yet, pause this, go start reading, and then come back. So Power Apps is really the standard way to deploy and distribute content to your users. So of course, there's other ways, individual sharing. We've talked about this on our 4th episode, but in order to distribute a significant amount of content to a significant amount of users in a professional standard way, it's Power BI apps. It's taking a workspace, the content there, organizing it, and basically installing it for the users to either they install it themselves or you install it automatically. This shows up on the app pane. It's basically a way to organize and intuitively distribute your content.
Now, the apps come with a bit of a history as well. And so I would love to be wrong yet again. So I'm going to make myself be wrong yet again on the podcast. So I think apps were kind of born out of content packs or content. What were they called, Seth, originally?
Content packs.
Yeah. Content packs.
I'm happy to be wrong with you on this.
They were a much better version of
a content pack.
Supposed to be, I think.
Yeah. So a content pack was something you kind of just think of all of the assets that were in a workspace. They kind of tried to bundle them up and stick them somewhere as a content pack. But I don't remember the editing. I can't remember why there was just some really weird ways of how that was working. But the idea was like you're basically bundling up all the assets of that workspace and making a content pack of all those assets.
Yeah, I think where that fell apart was like the assets themselves were almost like copied into other workspaces. So,
yes.
but still had a breadcrumb back to the original report. Where if you changed a data set or a report,
yes, everything broke.
You could break everything downstream.
Yeah.
Right. So you didn't know how many users downloaded your content pack. It was just It was
a
it
mess.
was not a good managed experience from a sharing perspective. So
And
they
then-
reimagined it and came
Yes.
up with apps.
So the content pack eventually became deprecated. Apps kind of became the new thing. Hey, let's talk about apps. And for the longest time, an app was, it still is. It's a one app, one workspace. You can have kind of a one-to-one tie between the two things. You could pick what kind of content you wanted to be available inside the app, turn these reports on or off, and then of those exposed reports, that's basically it. Hit publish, and that becomes an app that is published, which then, I mean, it still links to the same data set inside the workspace. But I think once the app is published, you have a list of, here's the reports you can see inside the app. Okay.
Now with that,
Now,
Tommy, tell us about the State of Goblins article. Why is it so cool?
Well,
Yeah, why is
first,
this
What
cool?
new
you're
feature have we
Kurt,
seen?
So everyone, if you see, we've been talking a lot about Data Goblins. Kurt Bueller, I believe, is how you say his name. Yeah, someone mentioned, I think it was Dan. He's like, this podcast is becoming the Talk About Data Goblins podcast. I'm like, you write great content, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it just seems like everything he's coming out with gold. So the content itself, or the article itself, is the new feature we've mentioned in our intros, is the ability to create audiences for apps, where it's basically like different tabs based on security groups that organize the content different ways. In a sense, it's multiple apps, even though it's not called that, per workspace. What Kurt's doing here is he's saying, hey, don't just think about this from a security point of view of, hey, this is this security group, they only see this, they should only see this. From a governance point of view, think about this from a feature point of view. And to take that mindset. And he really talks about three main areas that you can use the app audiences in a different light. Is the using it as a tutorial, having a tab for like how to use Power BI. I know, Mike, that I think that's your favorite. Simplifying experiences, so really breaking down like sub departments.
Yep.
So there is no like overall sense. And my personal favorite, which I will speak to, is having like a preview tab. But again, is turning the mindset of, this is not for security, this is for the feature, like thinking this is a feature based or content, app content management. And that's really what's been created here.
Yeah. So I would say, prior to this, like an audience of people, whatever that team may be, right? I have like, hey, I have a report that Tommy and Seth need to see, but Mike can't, right? So that would be like my audience. And then maybe I have the same data set, but maybe a different report that maybe Mike and Tommy should see, but Seth should not, right? So you're talking about like two different groups of people previously on the apps, deployed with Power BI. I feel like that's an episode of like a prequel. Yeah. Exactly right. So previously on apps, you'd have to have two workspaces to manage that. There's different audience members because you could only publish to one group of people. So it was like one audience, one app. It was so limiting, and it just became, from a developer standpoint, a nightmare to manage. Basically, you had all these different workspaces for every single audience. Now this gives you this capability of having, a larger audience for a single app, but then dividing that audience into groups or buckets, which I think was really slick. But I think in the article here, again, Tommy, you kind of point out really well, right? There's three key areas that Kurt goes into that I think are actually really the, things I didn't think about when thinking about app audiences, like a tutorial. Like here, here's information about this model. Here's how these tables relate. Here's stuff you want to think about. So you can actually have like URLs. He actually has on here like a contact page. Like you have questions about this report, click here. Or he's including URLs. Or, hey, here's the documentation link for where this content comes from. Hey, you need training content to be able to use this drill through feature or these charts or whatever. You can actually put that directly inside the report. And I think that's a great recommendation to have another tab that's just around educating. And I think, Tommy, we've beat this idea up a lot. And Seth, I think you as well, is like, as much as you build time to create the report, you need to really have a plan to how to educate people how to use the report. There's a whole, adoption of the report. And if it's not getting used, maybe because people don't understand it.
I think for me, the interesting thing about this article and the feature in general was I wasn't thinking about this in the way they presented it, right? I was thinking, oh, it's an app. I'm going to have a back end experience where I get to pick and choose my audiences, and they're just going to see, the thing in the way the app displays typically. What I didn't think about was, what if I'm part of multiple audiences? Which obviously Microsoft did a good job of thinking through in like the user experience.
Yeah.
Because what it allows you to do is basically have a higher level of page navigation on the top that allows this other experience
Yes.
that Kurt dove into head first and came up with some really good ideas out of the byproduct of that, where we can now use that capability to create different experiences. Where I think obviously our first go around was like, hey, do we have a report within the app that shows like the training or the homepage? And I still think that's applicable, but this kind of breaks it up into a different realm where it's like, hey, what if I had an audience that everybody was a part of or whatever, that's just the homepage or just the centralized, you need to know this about the reports in this app. And that's where I think it opens up the possibility of a lot more different scenarios where you can create content for audiences, but at the same time, thinking about like where I haven't fully digested is how do you manage the audiences then, right? Because I went from just reporting like reports to manage these things in an app to now managing audiences and the content that they can see within this new experience. And I think that's where it's like, oh wow, there's a lot there. But I think where he starts and he lands with a few of these recommended approaches is great. And I love the feature in that it provides this capability of having really a different UI element and way in which people can access reports within the same app, and really extends the capability of apps exponentially, right?
Yeah. What do you guys think about the simplified user experience? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tommy.
No, I want to make sure. I want to make sure before we're done with the podcast, we really talk about that, the audiences and how to manage that. That's a huge point. Just on terms of where we're at with it, not necessarily right now, but that's a huge point to this. But the simplifying user. I'll let you speak to that because I think you have some good points there. Because I really want to talk about the preview one.
Oh, you want to talk about preview? Yeah, I liked preview, but I thought really interesting. I was like simplifying the user experience. I thought that was very relevant because on the top there's a tab navigation that has. So this is the example that Kurt gives here in the little infographic is, let's imagine we have a list of like 5 or so reports. We have something about orders, profitability, our pricing report, our sales report, and maybe like an overview report, and a couple other things he has on there as well. Like inside this, he has a section called like month-to-date reports or other sections that apply to that. And so I really like the idea of him being able to like center around a particular topic or particular area. Maybe you have 2 or 3 reports that are only centering around orders in your system or orders in your company, right? It would make sense if you click on the orders section, all the other reports would be hidden basically, and you can only see the orders reporting. So that way, if I'm a user and I'm coming into this experience, like, okay, I'm not as interested about these other areas of the report app, right? I'm focusing in on just specifically the orders area. Let's just go there. And so what it does is it helps me remove noise. And this is something that we talk about when we work with building reports. We talk about the cognitive load. More things on the page just require you to read more, understand more about what's going on. So the more you can take away that's not relevant or not interesting to that user, the easier it is for them to consume the content. I just thought that was a really elegant way of being able to, again, in a very simple way, clean up the list of reports or things that you're presenting to the end user to make it quicker for them to find the answers they're looking for.
And this is a great example too of how technology can affect process. I think really because this is before, if you wanted to create that audience, like maybe you needed like a sales ops, right? You had to create a different workspace for that, or you group that into the sales workspace, which was kind of convoluted. A lot of times you just go the route of let's create a workspace in an app for this. This is going to allow people, users and developers in the future, like, well, we don't need to create a workspace. We can actually just use the app audiences. There's a few questions that I think lead there. does that's best practice of how much content in a workspace still apply now because we have other options? I don't know. I think that's a question to be asked at a later point. But this is going to probably create more workspaces with more content.
This will create more workspaces
or
with more
less
Why?
workspaces with more content.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
That would be, and thinking about like maybe, as you look at a company organization, right? If this is a behavior that you want to encourage, this may be something you want to track in your KPIs moving forward. So if you think about like, what are some of the adoption KPIs? What are some best practices KPIs around what you're doing as an organization? This could be one of those. How many apps do we have in our environment? And then you can even monitor how many audiences are being applied to those apps. And then over time, you can track, okay, are we reducing the number of apps and consolidating content down instead of having to have a whole bunch of additional apps? If not, maybe there's some education that needs to be occurring inside your organization to inform people like, hey, there's a better way of doing app and user-based audience management as opposed to what you were previously doing.
I think an idea we're about hey, ironic, we're halfway in and an idea
that's waking up. Here we go.
We're at 35, we didn't start yet.
so the neat thing about this and where the thought is this feature related audience allows us to go horizontally and vertically within this experience, right? So I can create a guided experience for a particular audience, right? So if I have a group of analysts, I can have a beginner set, right? Here's your beginner tab or audience of reporting how I would present the data, or maybe it's like, here's the raw or raw-ish. If you need to access and dump it out to do some ad hoc analysis, then there's an intermediate level, right? A tab where I could, expand on the ideas, give you some insights, but at the same time, like you're going to be using Power BI more. And then there's maybe the expert or KPIs or whatever, right? A lot of different methods to create different experiences for the same audience. But then at the same time, I can go vertically where it's the same sales report, but I also have a management tab, and then I also have an executive tab. And from a report build and management perspective, I can have all of those reports in the same workspace and not have to do what we were doing before, which is separate this out into different workspaces for these different vertical audiences, even though all of the data sets were the same. So I think this is a huge time saver from the standpoint that especially where you have the same data being shaped in different ways for those audiences, now I can manage that really, really easily in this experience. And the other thing I love about the experience is it's all right there. So from an admin perspective, I love how they just like made this part of like a single place where I load in the content to the app, and then I pick an audience, pick and choose what I want to show, assign permissions, and I can easily just tab across to each of the different audiences and ensure that I've set up a complete experience so that when I publish that, it just the whole thing goes, right? It's not like I'm going from one page to the next, and it's all a very unified experience. And I love that part of it too.
So let me briefly talk about the preview. Then to your point, Seth, I have a hot take on, I think really that next step on how do people actually get this rolled out. Real quick, one of the things I love the most from the article was Kurt talked about like a preview tab, which really talked about like
I like this
adding
feature.
Yes. And this solves a huge amount of problems that I've tried rolling out in the organizations in the past. We created like analytical reports to show like the AI features in Power BI, but we never had a really good way to show people what was available. Like it's like, if you want to access, let us know.
The words of, we need to see the art of the possible, right? There's always this like, we're looking for the art of the possible type questions. I'm like, really? Like, we're gonna use the buzzwords on that one again? Yeah.
Well, I didn't use those words, but I mean, it's
you did, Tommy. You said like, I'll show you the art of the possible.
We show you the realm of the potential. So and that's how
the realm of the potential. I love it.
That's great. But one of the things we wanted to put that data science, the AI features, and we didn't want to roll that in production reports, but we want to show like, hey, here's some demo data or use the sales data and just show what you can do. And if you want that rolled into your next report, let us know. This preview feature opens up so many doors for us, not just for the tutorial side, but go, hey, here's this is a marketing app. Well, here's what it would look like with all the AI features, with the key, the decomposition tree, with the Q&A. If you want that in your next build, look here. We have all these features we can do. The testing things out, that allows us to do a lot more flexibility and not so go, it's wrong. It's like, well, you're on the preview tab. So it allows us to do so many other things that I really would encourage people to test out. And again, also for data champions, going back to the security groups, one thing that we've pushed is for people who, are your advocates for Power BI at the company. They're not developers. You open this tab for them and they get to see the latest features in those apps, or you're asking for their feedback. When we rolled out Power BI apps at one organization, we had a data champions team. We looked at the top 15 users of Power BI. We asked them if they wanted to be part of the champions. And as we were rolling out apps, we did feedback surveys, very similar, kind of like the MVP program in different use cases. It said, do you like this? Does this make sense? And got their feedback. So it's also a feedback loop too, but just for certain groups of people. So I don't think this one is maybe the most underrated out of the three, and I think they're one of the most powerful.
I like that idea.
So if you had a comment to that, because like I said, I do have a hot take.
No, I think the preview feature is a good thing. I do want to think about though is, if you're thinking about content and how you're producing this, my only hesitation with this is not a bad thing, but like the idea here is, in this example, you have like the regular version of the report, or the final version, and you have the preview version of the report. Maybe you're being a bit more experimental on some of those other visualization things. That, again, this is also speaking to like that data literacy portion, right? If my team is more data literate, I can be more experimental with the different visuals, or give them kind of a bit more thought what's going on in these visuals. If I need simple, if we're not as data literate, we're probably simplifying that experience down a bit more around that preview area, right? Here's stuff that Tommy relates to and thinks through. Put it out there, put the content out there, and see what people engage with that. I'd be curious to see if you had content that was how that was tracked inside the audit logs. I'm sure you could see all that, but you could see like, hey, how many people are actually using any of the preview features, or how, when you publish the app initially, people check it out and they're like, I don't use it, and they don't ever come back. Maybe it would tell you about how people would want to consume content in the future. I guess my point there was, I'm going to run on a tangent a little bit though, was, managing two files of the same thing potentially gets a little bit more tricky, because what if, when you make, in order to do this, you've actually made two copies of the same report, and maybe one's in test or one's a little earlier. So then, what are you doing? What would be your internal process to make sure that those changes in preview actually get finalized and moved into the final app, whatever that process may be? And so I think it's possible. You could definitely do some renaming thing on the file, but I think it would take a little bit more diligence on the developer side to make sure they're very careful about, hey, this is the sales preview file. I'll do all my work there. When we feel good about what we've done, we rename it to sales and then publish that file. But yet we still retain the preview file for anything new that we're doing, whatever that may be. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's a similar question. Or what are the things you would stick in preview versus a dev version? Because you're not going to like that. That's what I'm confused about here. Like what delineates those? Because I wouldn't want to bring dev into the production space.
No, 1,000%. I think preview is not, it's either things you're testing on your own, or it's like kind of like a sandbox of almost like, I don't want to say the data dump, but like, for example, that analytical reports, like the data science report and all the AI features kind of one. They're not nothing you're actually working on that's going to go to prod, but it's almost like a testing ground of we're looking at this type of data. Here's some features that we're using in here. Here's a Power App that can write back a demo, where it's all those things that people can either play around, or it's a new way you're looking at the data, but it's nothing that you're working on that you're actually going to put into production. Because I think to your point, that's going to lead to someone making a mistake in the future. But these are literally things in it, like a testing bed.
if I'm never going to put it in production, why am I putting it in my production workspace? I guess
so I would disagree with that
like
point.
the idea. I
Yes.
like the idea of like an advanced or an advanced exploration tab in here where these preview ideas or something would go, because what I'm doing is I want to see how an ML feature or a particular visual or something that I think would be really valuable to include in a report potentially, or how business would react to seeing something that does additional calculations on top of what they would typically do, and put that in an environment to see whether or not they find value in that on production data, because it's an option that I might include it in a report without just throwing it in a report and then disrupt people's world and be like, what's this new tab? Right. Because so I guess that's where I see it, but I'd stay away from kind of where the like your original comments were going, because to me, it rides the line of something I wouldn't even put in production.
I would definitely disagree with the production. Like to your point, Seth, I wouldn't put something in there that is not production ready. However, here's how I do think this use case would be. Like when we look at a data or a model, right? There's always the request. Here's the request I need. So I want these tables in this way on this page, right? That might be what I build. If I'm thinking about how I would use a preview feature, I'd have the data set and the final report. Like maybe that's the verbatim what the person asked for. In the previews area, I would use the same data set, maybe even just a brand new report. So it's like basically two thin reports on the same data set. And I'm thinking on the second report that is in quote unquote preview or other I the analyst or report builder would look at it going, all right, with fresh eyes, what am I going to build that's going to be impactful to the end user? And maybe it's, maybe it's listing out a single insight that you heard people talking about. What was my sales year over year, for blah, 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 whatever. You define the insight that you're trying to drive for, and you build one or two graphics around that particular insight. And maybe this is something where you're still presenting real data, but you're doing a bit more of a narrowed approach to something that you want people to see, right? Instead of just presenting the entire report with tables, maybe we're going to put a scatter plot and a bar chart, or maybe we use a custom visual to show some sort of interesting, grid matrix, heat matrix with a distribution plot on each end. Like you get a little bit more, you can be more creative. You have the ability of having more creative power potentially in that preview area. And then at least you have content you could show people. It's still the right answers of data. It's just maybe presented in a slightly different way.
And that's actually literally what we do with the analytical side of it. But I really do want to, I don't want to say push back, but at least really state that preview feature is meant to be preview. So if someone's using that for their reporting, well, we need to have that note in there that this is preview only. But we've talked about migrations of reports where like it's a need and an upgrade, whether we are upgrading the data or we're upgrading the entire interface. That preview side is a great way to get feedback. I mean, we ask Microsoft all the time to get feedback before they release something, or that's what the idea's pain is. So if we're making a major upgrade to one of our top 5 reports at the organization, or one of the that gold standard report, why wouldn't we want feedback? It may not be the entire audience of that app, but it may be a larger subset. Say, hey, this is what we're working on. This is maybe the new version of sales report 20, for company X. That being said, this is the story that we're going to be building in here. Do not use the data here. This is purely for, the features that are going to be there. Add in an NPS or add in a little Power Apps form in there, because that's what it's meant to be. So it's kind of like the sandbox, but it's also a place to get feedback. It doesn't have to be in every app, but I think for larger organizations or for larger apps, this is a great way to get collaboration between you and the organization. So
I like what's going on in the side chat here, right? So Greggy was saying, rather than a preview audience, why don't we discuss how happy we could make approximately 60% of users with a here your freaking tables for export tab, right? But and the reason I want to go with that idea is, if we think about a lot of our discussions over the past of like when we get a report request, what is our process and sussing out and figuring out what the audience needs. I think this provides us like potentially just the process in which we could say, hey, in this conversation, we start with what is the data set you need. That's a
Mhm.
paginated report, right?
Yes. Yes.
What are the insights you're trying to drive or get at? I don't know. Okay, well, here's your paginated report. That's in your paginated tab, and that's you're in that audience, right? So if I
need
have
access.
three different tabs, that's like
data
access or paginated.
That's my
reports.
access to data question. Yeah, I just need give me the data. I don't know what I don't know.
Right. Insights, which is
Mhm.
like, hey, we've curated some of this data, we've rolled it up, we've created some Power BI reports, we've aggregated some of these metrics for you. It's really easy for you to understand and find. And then maybe there's the dashboards, the KPI, like here are the things that have really gone through the grinder, and we're driving after some deep insights that should allow you to drive decision making on a larger level. And maybe we just do that, right? You get a report request and it's like, okay, well, I know the basis of that. It takes me 10 minutes to throw together a paginated report.
Yep.
Boom, there's that. Now I build the insights, and then you're giving data or insights to people depending on how many, like where they're at in their own process. But at the same time, you don't have to go backwards and say, well, we didn't provide you what you need.
Yes.
So it's almost like, the way I'm thinking about it is, it's part of, like, I'm going to take this thought further, where it's part of my process to just be like, okay, well, before I might have picked one of these things and I might have presented them to you in this fashion. But if I now have a way to organize that information for you, now I can just say, this is your sales report dash paginated, sales report dash whatever. Like, it could follow the same, to your point in our other conversation, naming conventions. Right. So it's the same thing, just served up in different ways.
I agree with that.
I like the idea, but I think the fear or the concern that I have is we're thinking as developers and not necessarily someone who may not have that same skill in Power BI. And I really want to push on, with app audiences, as we roll this out, we better have a game plan, a promotional plan, an organization set before we start doing it, without, in a sense, the objective for with each app. I think that could really break the actual success of this at an organization. If we just start creating tabs randomly without a real intentional look at what we need to do, who the audiences are, and how it's going to be organized, I don't think they're going to be used in the way that we want. And I think if we immediately,
so you just jump from brainstorming to like governance in 2 seconds. Like, all we're doing is throwing out ideas of like what are the different audience types or audience things that we would build within here, that we would address or solve some of the solutions that we've talked ad nauseum about. And I think we've already brought up 2 or 3 to like, now you're going to govern and, deploy. How do you get these audiences out and deployed?
No. So I'll backtrack, because I might have stated that wrong, because I'm not talking governance here. I'm saying, how are you going to roll it out, and how's the content going to be organized? And if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that there's a tab for just data dumps, data access.
I'm talking about different ways in which we would use audience tabs, because there are many different ways in which I pointed out previously. I think that you have a horizontal way within the same group and a vertical way. You're bridging different groups of people that would interact with the reporting. So I don't think this is going to be something where, hey, you throw away multiple workspaces. I think it just gives us more options to address solutions for different audiences. And that's what we're brainstorming.
Yes.
Yeah. And are you saying there's a tab though for data dump, basically, in so many words?
Call it whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's the 2 reporting needs. It's, I need access to data. Don't really give me insights on it. I just need to get to the information. And then there's I need insightful information about the data. Those are your 2 needs. Everything falls in one of those 2 buckets. If you're talking insights, you're curating visuals, you're describing it more, you're building a report around what actions come out of those insights. If someone's just saying, give me information, and that need happens, I think, more often than we would like. I think that's what Greg point was earlier, was 60% of his requests are just, I just need access to the information. And that's a great place for keeping some of these, here's your report, here's your insights reports, boom, boom, boom. And here's your export reports. And they're just paginated reports that let you export things.
I think you're opening up a can of worms, though, because
of course, I love cans of worms.
Oh, good. You go fishing then. So, But no, but honestly, that like the concern is really like you start having a tab on every app that's tables or whatever we want to call it, right? Well, someone's going to go, where's my data? Where's my table? And then you don't, we've talked about too, we don't want general reports, and we just don't want reports for giving me my data. Like that's not what we're here for.
It's just I disagree though.
No,
okay,
no,
I disagree.
But
no,
if that
that's not
tab's
what we
now
talked
available, no, but if that tab's available to everyone, where are they going to go?
What do you mean where they're going to go? We've talked ad nauseum about like if somebody's asking for a report and you're leaning into the business user who's the audience and you're saying, okay, business user, I can develop this report for you. What are the insights you're driving at? I'm going to have a conversation of 10 different questions of different ways I want to create an insightful report for you. And that person is like, I don't know. I just need the data. We've said, okay, great. Here, let me give you the data. You can do some analysis on it and let me know if I can build something for you that is going to save some of your time. But in the meantime, I'm not going to go try to build you an insight report because you're not giving me anything back. So you get tabled. So there are certainly scenarios right now that I would say are absolutely just going to get into the paginator, the data dump tab, because that person doesn't know anything. Now, I actually think that would be a benefit to them, because if they see another tab where it's like insights reports, then they'll drive at like, oh, I see, Tommy over in, finance, and he's got all these reports, and holy cow, like he's got all of them rolled up and aggregated. Maybe I can look at my business in that way too. Right? Because then you're driving the conversation there. But to say that that's not where you would end, or you have to always build Power BI reports, I think is where we've also talked about, we've put ourselves in a position where we've rolled back and said, no, there's definitely a place for paginated.
Yes.
Because people aren't using Power BI reports the way we would want them to.
Correct.
So therefore you get a data dump.
Yeah. Don't ask me for large tables in Excel file and in Power BI files. It just doesn't work as well. I'd rather have you just go to a paginated report.
One of the things we've talked about, and then I know we need to move on. We have another kind of like last point here, but we're trying to discourage people from just getting data dumps, and we're trying to make them think about their data, not just give me all the data, but them trying to think of what's actionable towards me.
But that's assuming that they're already there. That's assuming that the person is already at the place where they're like, help me insightfully look at my data. That person may not be at that place where they're like, hey, I understand insights are important. I need to take action and stuff. They may not even know what action to take. They may not even know what insights they're looking for yet. So like there's a portion of this that's just like, you're just trying to meet a need. And it may be over time, to your point, Tommy, you want to get them towards the insights and that is the end vision or the end goal, is they're not just jumping out data and let it happen, whatever happens. Because, who knows when after that data leaves that table, who knows what they do with it.
Last thing, we're trying to nudge behavior, and if you have that tab, they're never going to be nudged to think a different way. If you
totally disagree with you,
we will say that for another topic. Gosh, because I'm ready to go another hour. So on this,
all right. So I have one more topic here that I think you brought up earlier in the podcast, Tommy, that I think was very important and very insightful. Was, hey, let's just think about the audiences. How do you manage these audiences? Where do they come from? How would you put them into these apps themselves? So open for thoughts there. I think you can use an individual user email address, and you can use an Active Directory security group. So there's two ways to manage an audience, by individually adding the people during publish, or making a security group that contains the people in that audience. Thoughts, guys? Seth, what do you think?
I mean, I'm not discounting at all what Tommy was talking about, right?
Yeah.
After we figure out what these buckets or the capabilities and how to utilize audiences, like sharing and or potentially describing in the app or maybe it's by color, Tommy, like what type of app and audience implementation we're doing, I think would be hugely valuable to govern and let the organization know how you're developing or shifting that message of presenting information to folks. So I absolutely think it's part of the conversation at some point. It's just a matter of like figuring out what are the different ways we can implement, and then how you would like create that wiki of here's what you can expect to see in these scenarios, and we've defined them in this way. So when you pop into this app, you'll know that this one, you'll only see a single tab depending on if you're on the low end or executive. If you pop into this one, you're going to see this type of implementation, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Because it drives behavior. And of course, in terms of adoption or changing how you're going to present data, which I think this feature allows us that conversation point to have and potentially shift how we are able to present data. And I think I see a lot of really positive things around that. Right.
So I want to, I think maybe I asked my question maybe a bit weird, or maybe I did a disservice as we tried to transition topics here. I'm really thinking like how in the creation of the audience, how do you manage them? What's the best way to simplify that experience there? And I really, I mean, from a governance standpoint, if we're thinking about like how people are going to get into this group or manage groups, I'm honestly, as the report builder, I don't want to be the guy who's always having to update the report every single time a new user is being added to an audience.
Right.
Like I don't want to like, you can imagine like if you had hundreds of users that are coming in and out and people are hiring and moving through departments or whatever, there's going to be a potential constant churn of tickets that would come through the management of people of this report or this audience. So for me, the very first thing I'm doing when I'm talking about audiences is I'm thinking, what are the logical audiences I can set up in Active Directory, and how can I provide an owner to manage the people that are in or out of said app? So I want to delegate that responsibility to the leader of the sales team, the leader of the whatever. Like if we're building this report for a particular audience, identify who that owner is and let them manage it inside Active Directory, because you can actually provide owner level access to a security group, which means they can add and remove people as needed, and I don't ever have to update the app. So I would highly recommend looking at that feature.
So I'm going to drop in and say, like, I think that's the same thing Tommy just did, but that deserves its own podcast later on, because I think once we start talking about and defining like groups of different ways we would deploy an audience, it's a huge challenge point. It would absolutely, like, how the heck do you manage that in AD groups? Because we certainly don't want to do this. Like if you thought permissioning on a workspace level or a sharing level was bad, like this adds a whole nother level of permissioning that, I highly recommend not doing individually, right? Like,
no.
Imagine that spider web of a garbage.
Oh my goodness.
Man, absolutely. Like how do you now we'd be relying on AD in a completely different way.
Yes.
If we start introducing the audience part of it.
And 100% with you, Seth. And I think this is the challenge that we're going to have to figure out, whether it's buying a box of donuts for IT or buying them lunch once a week. But like we're going to, because if we're going to do this, I don't want to say right, but if you want to have that flexibility, you're going to need greater access to security groups in a way that we've never had before, in a much more dynamic way. And maybe it's like a PBI underscore something, but this really opens up or somebody on the business side's level of access to security groups or distribution list in a way that is custom just for PBI or for Power BI. Yep. This is the governance side of this. You're completely right, but this is the greatest challenge. This is going to be our greatest hurdle now with app audiences, because they've opened up this amazing feature with all these audiences, but we have no way to manage those audiences on a large scale unless you're working with IT. So this is, and I think that is, a complete topic of conversation.
All right.
Either way, huge kudos and thanks to Kurt for a great article, which spawned
two topics that are in our trello board.
He always puts out great stuff, and in a way that I think we enjoy talking about.
Excellent. And I'll say, Microsoft, if you're not listening, man, go hire Data Goblin. I mean, all one of you, even from Microsoft, you go hire Data Goblins. I think Kurt is just killing it right now. He's just the content he's putting out, the way he articulates it, the graphics, the information, it's just so well done. So I think there's a gem out there. So Microsoft, pay attention. I'll take a 10% commission, please. Thank you very much. And with that, we really appreciate you guys as the audience. We love the chat that's occurring here on inside the YouTube channel. So if you are joining us, we'd love you to join us on YouTube. We have a lively chat going during each of the podcasts. Our only ask or only request back to you: you get all this free content, you get all these insights and funny jokes, and watching Seth and Mike tease Tommy all the time, and all the enjoyment you can get from that. So
yeah, you want to talk about the color for background? Listen, I'm already so colorful. I don't need a background.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's white.
Oh, you don't, which is why it's you get more bling. You're getting more bling up there every day, bud.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, our only request is back to you, the audience, is if you like this content, if you like what you're hearing, if you're learning some insightful things, but also getting some entertainment with it, please share what you're hearing and let other people know that you're enjoying the content. We appreciate a post on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you guys post socially, or if you actually go into the office these days, tell someone at work, hey, I found this podcast. It's kind of cool. We recommend you listening to it. We'll be here every Tuesday, Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast if you're not listening live?
So I'm going to give a challenge to everyone. Try to find another content out there that's arguing about app audiences. And by next week, if you can't, you need to post on LinkedIn or Twitter. No one else argues about app audiences but the Explicit Measures podcast. If you can find someone, I will give you some swag. But that's going to be the challenge.
Which means Mike will be paying for it.
I got a hat.
Tommy will give you Michael's swag. That's all right. That's how it works.
If that's how it works, it's like, okay, so I got a competition too.
You can find it Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the things. Anywhere that you like consuming content, we're there.
Sounds good. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you, the audience, and we'll see you on this Thursday. Let's try that again. We'll see you this Thursday. See you. Bye.